Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Steve Rohde. I'm always so proud to have you join us on events like this. I'm chair of Interfaith Communities United for Justice and Peace. Our group, which this year is celebrating 20 years. 20 years we've been at this since we were convened by the Reverend George Regas and other leaders and activists in the anti-war and peace and justice movements. ICUJP is dedicated to the proposition that religious communities must stop blessing war and violence. And we've committed ourselves to that for almost 20 years. We meet regularly on Fridays, most recently on Zoom, and we've had extraordinary programs and speakers literally from all around the world. And we invite you to join us on Fridays at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. We also are very active in supporting issues that are meaningful to us, holding conferences, events, meeting with elected officials. We have an annual event declaring that we must close Guantanamo prison. We hold that event in January. And this year, we are going to commemorate 20 years of our existence, along with commemorating the life and work of George Regas, our convener, whom we lost last year. We urge you to save the date for Saturday, September 11, in the late afternoon, when we will actually be convening both in person at All Saints Church in Pasadena, as well as online, so that even more people can join us in Southern California, around the country, and indeed around the world. You'll be getting more details about that program, but for now, simply save Saturday, September 11 for our 20th anniversary and the celebration of the life of George Regas. For housekeeping purposes, you can put questions into the chat directed to Jody Armour, our trustee moderator today. I'll have a few more words to say about him in a moment. And we will proceed as follows. After my welcome, I'll introduce Jody. He'll have some opening comments, and then he will turn to our speakers. They'll have an opportunity to offer some opening comments about the state of the criminal legal system, of the LA Prosecutor's Office, of police accountability, money bail, and a range of other issues that are important to this community. This is the second. Now it must, if you do something twice, it's a series. So we first held on March 21st, our first in this series, which was called Backlash to Justice. And that's exactly what is happening in this period of time. This is a backlash to justice. I hope that programs like this will encourage you to come back to ICUJP events. We depend on your generosity. We have a slide that indicates that you can support us with donations by going directly to our website, by texting a donation, or old school mailing one in to our address. We really do appreciate your financial support. We understand that this is a difficult time for many people, and it certainly has been for us, unable to meet and gather face to face. whatever you can donate that is for you a significant contribution will help us keep up the kind of work we've been doing now on to 50 years. As I frame the program, Dr. Melina Abdullah has been at this work for generations, years of activism and resistance, and is a founder of Black Lives Matter LA, and she'll be introduced more fully by Jody Armour. She and her colleagues and allies set the stage to displace Jackie Lacey, the former DA of Los Angeles County, for a variety of reasons, including Lacey's failure to hold police accountable. Elections have consequences, and George Gascon ran for office in an open and candid platform that called for progressive changes in the DA's office. He has lived up to those promises, and consequently, there has been a backlash to justice as far as his office is concerned. But the people of Los Angeles, knowing his platform, elected him. And we believe programs like this that bring community leaders together with elected leaders is exactly what the people of this community need at this time. And that's why we're so thrilled to be able to host a program of this kind. I'm really pleased to introduce our moderator. I have known of Jody for years, but recently in the context of these programs, work with ICUJP, work on freedom of the press and saving Julian Assange and a variety of other activities, I've grown to even more deeply respect and admire Jody Armour. He is Roy P. Crocker Professor of Law at the University of Southern California, currently teaching criminal law, torts, and a seminar on stereotypes, prejudice, and the rule of law. Widely published scholar, has a new book out on race. Popular lecturer, he studies the intersection of race, law, morality, psychology, politics, ordinary language, philosophy, and the performing arts. He is a Renaissance man, and we're very grateful, Jody, that you will be moderating today's program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. And it's really a pleasure for me to be able to moderate a discussion between two people like Melina Abdullah and George Gascon, who I learn a ton from every time I'm in earshot of them. And so as the moderator, I get to sit back and really kind of bask in some of the insights. And I'm really looking forward to that. Let me start out by introducing my longtime comrade, Melina Abdullah, who professor of Pan-African Studies at Cal State LA. I consider her, kind of the leading professor of praxis, if you will, in the nation. She brings theory and practice together, and like no one else I've seen, in the academy, frankly, or out. And it's just been awe-inspiring to see how much the Overton window has shifted as a result of the efforts and interventions of Black Lives Matter LA, Black Lives Matter more generally, and Melina Abdullah has been right at the heart of this, at the vanguard of this generational movement that we're in the midst of. And I'm also always thrilled to be able to be in conversation with or hear the remarks of George Gascon, District Attorney Gascon really is a forerunner in some ways that some don't appreciate. When you think of iconic progressive prosecutors, a lot of people think of Larry Krasner and maybe even now Chester Boudin and others around the country. But actually up in San Francisco, George Gascon was taking the lead in a lot of progressive policy kinds of interventions that made the criminal justice system up there fair without making it, without compromising safety in the process. And so, you know, I think that right now, the most kind of iconic DA in the nation would that mantle would have to shift now to George Gascon. I mean, this is by far the largest DA's office in the nation. Philadelphia, by comparison, has around 300. We're over 1,000, maybe around 1,200 here, DAs. I'll be corrected by DA Gascon if I'm off by much, but it's the largest by far in the nation. And therefore, it is the bellwether that a lot of other prosecution offices are looking to and will look for guidance from. And so the success of what's going on here is going to have repercussions around the nation. So with that kind of background now, I want to just kind of launch into the question before us, the backlash to justice that we're talking about. And, you know, we knew this backlash was coming, but, you know, some might see it as a, you know, oh, what is the backlash to justice? They think that justice is, you know, retribution, retaliation, revenge, making people suffer as much as possible and not holding police too accountable because they're just people too, and they have, and you know, and so they make mistakes too. So let's not hold police too accountable, and let's really crack down on, you know, kind of the people who are, the people who the police crack down on, disproportionately the Black community, brown community, people from marginalized communities and the like. How do you respond to that? How are we? Why are we seeing such fierce resistance to this? Because as I recall, as Steve Rhodey pointed out, it was just a few months ago we had the election, and the democratic will of the people was expressed, I think, in no uncertain terms. And so, just from a democracy standpoint, I'm concerned about, you know, what this says about kind of our democratic system that we're going through this again. But let me start. I'm going to start the questioning with you, Melina, and then go to my good friend George. But you know, I think without Black Lives Matter LA and the activism, street grassroots activism that's going on, the way wouldn't have been paved for us to bring in this, you know, generational DA in George Gascon. So I'm going to start with you. And what do you think is about this backlash and how we should be thinking about responding to it?
Sure. Well, thank you for the introduction. And it's great to be with both of you, two of my favorite people. And I'll just say thank you for the very generous introduction, Jody. You know how I feel about your work, and especially this book that you released almost a year ago now. I guess it's not brand new, but it's new. And anybody who hasn't read N-Word Theory, take the summer. It won't take you the whole summer. Take a couple weeks in the summer and read it. It's one of very few books that I go around kind of pushing on folks. I got a stack in my living room for gifts because it's just a profound approach to how we have to struggle for justice, what we're all called to do in the struggle for justice. So I'm really grateful to be in this struggle with you. And you've been here from the beginning of Black Lives Matter, and you continue to be here even when we're criticized, not just when it's popular. And so we're grateful that you're willing to do this work and have been just a fierce comrade in this work. George, I just want to say I find myself, when we talk about backlash to justice, I just want to put things in context, that we spent more than 3 years outside the Hall of Justice, Sometimes in the midst of, this last year when there was just this groundswell of people rising up, demanding justice, we'd have sometimes tens of thousands of people outside. But I remember the 3+ years leading up when sometimes we would have 5 of us huddled in the rain, trying to get beneath one of those awnings and being harassed by the sheriff and told we weren't allowed to be on the public property that our tax dollars paid for. And eventually they erected those barriers, those metal barriers that are now around the Hall of Justice. Before our protests, the Hall of Justice was actually a sightseeing tour. So people would go in on walking tours and look inside the building. But as soon as we started protesting, they closed the Hall of Justice to public traffic. So I'm used to the protest. What I'm not used to is now going from chanting Jackie Lacey must go, Jackie Lacey will go, to chanting stand with George, to hashtagging stand with Gascon. And I'm constantly checking with my friends in the movement and saying, are we doing this right? Because this feels strange to be standing alongside the DA, who's also a former cop, right? And saying we're standing with him. And I had one of those moments we were together in person the last time, 9 days ago, so Juneteenth Eve. And there was a massive rally. SEIU 2015 was there, the Carpenters Union was there, Black Lives Matter was there, lots of different groups, LA Voice, lots of different groups there to stand with George Gascon. And I offered brief remarks. And then when I stepped back, Father Boyle offered some remarks, and then you came to the podium. And it was June 18th, and no one had really spoken about Juneteenth. And here comes George Gascon stepping to the mic, speaking about Juneteenth, but not in the way that, liberal kind of voices had been speaking to it. He spoke to it in terms of the legacy of chattel slavery. You spoke to it in terms of what does it mean in terms of repairing unjust systems and the economic fallout of those systems. You spoke of it also in terms of what does the DA's office and what does the criminal legal system have to look like, recognizing this moment that we're in. And I just remember exhaling and thinking, he continues to go further than we asked him to go. And so I just want to say that I stand proudly alongside you, not because I like you, and I do like you, right? But that's not why I'm standing alongside you. It's because the agenda that you're carrying is the people's agenda in the way that Jody Armour describes the people, right? That the people are those who have been most castigated, right? The people who have been most set aside. It's the N-words of the world. And you have continued to stand in that way. I'll say one more thing before I'm quiet, that Black Lives Matter is in the midst of building our first prison chapter. And I was on the phone, I won't say, I can say where. I was on the phone with some brothers up at Lancaster Prison yesterday for about an hour. And there might have been 5 or 6 of them that were cycling in and out, talking with me on the phone. And one of the brothers who came on had been in prison for 16 years, since he was a 15-year-old child. He had been convicted of attempted murder he was basically brandishing a gun. He hadn't shot anybody. He didn't really threaten anybody, but he was a 15-year-old child, right? His sentence, the maximum sentence, was 9 years. But all of the enhancements, because he lived in Inglewood, because, and was in a gang neighborhood, because he had a weapon, he got a gun enhancement and a gang enhancement. So he's been in there for more than half of his life. He's only 31 years old now. but has been in there since he was 15. And what he said to me, his name is Ryan, is that he just got a letter. He just got a letter, and they want to look into his case because he's eligible for a review because of what you've done around enhancements. So this very young man who went in as a child, he may now be able to see the rest of his life because of this demand for justice that you've been carrying. So I'm lifting that up to say that there is policy work that's being done, but it impacts the real lives of our people and our community members. And I was just so humbled and grateful to hear how it's impacting a real life of this phenomenal young man who's been incarcerated since he was a 15-year-old child. So the backlash is coming. Here's the answer to the question. The backlash is coming because there are people like terrible examples like Alex Villanueva, right? Because of police associations, because of moneyed white capitalist, racial capitalist interests that are profiting. And because they're profiting, they're tethering themselves to models of injustice that enable them to line their pockets and really assure a system of white supremacy that gives them the false notion that the existing racial hierarchy is good for them. The existing racial hierarchy isn't good for anyone. But because they're at the top of it, they bought into the idea that it's good for them. So the backlash is coming because what you're doing, what we're doing because you're carrying our agenda. This is not just your agenda, right? What we're doing is seeking to fundamentally transform the world in which we live, seeking to topple systems that lock up people like Ryan at 15 years old and throw them away. We're seeking to create communities where our communities are well-resourced, not over-policed. And so those who have tethered themselves to the old way of doing things, of course, they're holding on for dear life. They're filing lawsuits. They're trying to, pull the money out of Measure J. They're trying to recall you. They are trying to criminalize Black Lives Matter for protesting. They're trying to engage in discreditation and threats because they are desperate to hold on to this unjust system. So I hope that answers the question, but I hope it also compels us to say that's why we also have to double down on the struggle for real justice and say they can claw and clamor all they want. The people are stronger than these very narrow special interests.
Great, Melina. I'm gonna go to you now, George, and I'm gonna lead in with a connection to a mutual friend of ours, Larry Krasner, who had to deal with a primary campaign, a kind of referendum on how his office had performed basically over this last term, right? And he was put up against a law and order alternative, a strong law and order alternative. And Larry not only trounced him 2-1, but in Black communities that most bear the brunt of violent crime, he beat the opponent by 80%, at an 80% range, right? Even though these communities are saying, we are suffering from this spike in violence, they are not falling for the old, and that's somehow connected to the DA's policies rather than a whole lot of other things. So, what's your sense overall, George, with that in mind, that this approach has been taken already with Larry and didn't prevail, but what's your sense of the backlash here, particularly in Southern California, LA area?
No, thank you, Jody. It's always great to be with you and Melina. You know, there's a great deal of mutual respect here. And so many of you in this conversation today. And, you know, there's so much to unpack here. And I love the way Melina just laid it out, because it very concisely lays out so much of what is going on. And I will begin by saying that I think Ryan's story is a wonderful illustration of what is wrong with the system. And the people that are pushing for this recall, they're not about community safety or community health. They're really about punishment, and punishment that is driven by, I would argue, two factors. In some cases, you have some people that have been hurt, and they want an eye for an eye, which is understandable, and I would never question that. But that's not the way you develop public policy. That's not how you make a community safe. But then when you really peel the onion, and the factor that is really driving all of this, and I think Melina talked about it so well, it's really about economic and political power. We have people that stand to lose political power. We have people that stand to lose economic power if we begin to decarcerate our communities. Plain and simple. It has nothing to do with safety. In fact, what is so damaging about this dialogue is that actually the carceral system that we've had for years not only hasn't enhanced safety in our communities, it has increased insecurity. It has increased the harm of crime. We have a system that fails somewhere around 70% of the time, meaning that the people that we intervene with this harsh approach to accountability and punishment actually come back and they harm themselves and they harm others again, because we created the circumstances for that. But yeah, they take the mantle of this is about community safety. And, you know, they love to talk about crime going up, but they forget that, you know, crime has gone up under the old system. And crime has gone up in places where you continue to have very conservative, very right-wing leadership. So if it were about reform policies, then it would only be, crime would only be going up in the places where you have reform and not in the place where you don't, right? They don't care about the facts, right? I mean, that's not the issue for them. The issue is trying to fearmonger and to push a dialogue that is centered around lies and misinformation, and then make a lot of noise. And it's really interesting because, as Melina indicated, and this might seem minor, but it says so much about what's going on. Those fences that have been put around the Hall of Justice, so Black Lives Matters and other community groups, when they come in, including the rally that was there to support me, cannot go on the steps of the Hall of Justice, are actually removed when the sheriff is signing a recall petition and having his conversation around why we need to have a recall. So even that is so blatantly discriminatory, right? And I know that may seem, somehow minor, but it's not when you look at the messaging. When you have these folks doing the demonstrations, miraculously, those fences disappear and they have access to the steps of the Hall of Justice. But when the community's talking, we have to stand on the sidewalk, and then we got to be careful we don't stand on the street, because then we get cited for being on the streets, right? And Melina's absolutely right. This is not about George Gascon. It is not my agenda. And I so aggressively push back when people say this is your agenda, because it is not. This is a community agenda. This is about all of us. This is about the future generations of our community and doing what we know that is going to make us better, and what we know that will eliminate the things that have failed us over and over again, and they're so ingrained in a system that is systemically racist, without a question. But I tell you what I am really, really fearful now. I am fearful about the beginning of a conversation that I'm seeing, even coming from, moderate to somewhat progressive corners that are saying, crime is going up. And I'm hearing some of the echoes of the 1980s and 1990s. I just saw the new effort by the president, and I understand he's in a very difficult place. But, we're talking about now taking some of the money that, has been put on for relief in the communities and maybe going back to hiring more police. And I question that, because we know that that is not necessarily what many of our communities need. That's not what is going to make us safer. So I worry that the 1980s and 1990s conversation is starting to come up, instead of saying, those policies, those things that we did back then and we continue to do got us to where we are today. And yes, there is an increase in violence in our communities, but it has nothing to do with moving away from the punishment base and the carceral system. It has everything to do with the economics and the social injustices and the problems that we've had that were accentuated during COVID. I want to show you something, because this illustrates what we're fighting. This here is the front page of the Thin Blue Line, which is the publication that the police union and LAPD puts out every month, which I tend to be featured almost every month. And sometimes I make the front line, and I'm keeping a collection of this, but this is the latest one. And this is a conversation that they're pushing around our community. George Gascon, the friend of criminals. And you see, it's easy to fearmonger when you have this messaging. And for most people, frankly, they don't take the time to peel the onion. You have your officer coming in to take a crime report because your home maybe was broken in or your car was stolen. And here you have an officer saying, but for George Gascon, this would not be happening to you, without any consideration to the fact that crime actually has been going down in every community. And even the small spike that we have today is a spike that is a national spike going across the place, regardless of who's running the show, because precisely the economic, the social injustices, the displacement of so many people in our community, and, dare I say, the continued proliferation of guns in our community that continue to provide the tools that when people are angry, when people are in despair, when people have no hope, when people have mental health problems, all of a sudden is this tool of destruction that is so readily available that can add to the complicated situation that we already have. But by God, we have a right to have these tools of destructions and spread them all over our community like a plague. And no one, but a few, are willing to put any blame on those policies. So I'm going to stop there, because I know there's going to be a lot of questions, but I think it's really, really important for all of us to understand unequivocally, this is not about safety. This is about punishment. This is about raw political power. This is about economic interest. If you look at the people that are feeding into this recall, we have mega donors from the Republican Party, like the developer here in LA called Jeff Palmer, who just towards the end of last year gave Donald Trump $2 million in addition to giving millions of dollars to other Republican causes. We have a guy like Steve Cooley, who very hardcore Republican, former district attorney, who campaigned aggressively against me last time around. And increasingly we're finding out that he has a lot of interest in continuing the carceral system. We have people like Dennis Zion, who was a councilman in LA, but prior to that, he was a director of the Los Angeles Police Protective League, also a Republican. I can go on and on and on. Obviously police unions that are involved in this. So let's not be fooled. This is not about safety. This is about raw political power and economic interest.
The fear mongering, George, that seems to be the go-to tactic for a lot of those opposing progressive DAs. I saw it back in Philly with Krasner and other races, the go-to seems to be violent crime, murder in particular is going up, other violent crimes, there's a spike, and that's because we have progressive prosecutors and or we have defunded police in some way, some combination, even though, as you point out, you have jurisdictions that have not in any way unbundled or defunded police, actually have added much more to their budgets, and they've seen a crime spike. There's been jurisdictions that have been very conservative, tough on crime, law and order DAs. They've seen spikes in murders in those jurisdictions. And so rather than seeing that there's really nothing there to say causally about a progressive DA and any spike in crime, rather than acknowledging that, it seems that folks don't want to attend to what really might be concerning, which is that the status quo, where you have a lot of money being spent on police and the old way of prosecuting, crimes, that status quo that has failed. That's where the crime is spiking, right? Wherever you look. So instead of anybody saying, let's look to the status quo and talk about how it's failed, they're saying, let's look at progressive prosecutors and talk about how they fail, when it's the status quo. It's police, frankly, who aren't solving the crimes, right? I don't know. You tell me, George, are police coming to you with cases, with plausible cases of violent crimes, and you're saying, no, I just can't do anything about that, no, or are they just not bringing you the cases?
George, it's interesting that you say this, because every case that the police brings that has sound and admissible evidence, especially when it comes to violent crime, we're prosecuting those cases. And even when you look at my policies, which is very interesting, and I'm going to just focus now on people that commit really serious violent crimes, they are going to prison. The difference between what I'm doing and what was being done before is that, we're saying there is no value in sending somebody to prison for life. There is absolutely no value in the death penalty. Yes, we need accountability. Yes, there are sometimes members of our community that are dangerous and they have to be separated from the rest of us. But we also have to look beyond, and we have to look for ways to provide people an opportunity to rehabilitate themselves and redemption and be able to come back, much like Ryan. And I think Ryan is probably a bad example, because it appears that Ryan actually went to prison for something that maybe he shouldn't have, certainly not for the period of time. But let's take the people that actually do commit the ultimate crime, that they commit a murder, under the heat of passion, under some silly fights or whatever it is, which definitely have to be accountable. And they do need to go to prison for a period of time. But should there be no opportunity at all for redemption and rehabilitation? And, I argue that that is not the answer from a social policy stance. But even if you don't care about the social policy, and, I tell people, look, let's park that for a corner. Maybe you disagree with me on social justice. If you want to look at it purely on the economic lens, we're spending billions and billions of dollars in policies that do not bring any more safety. So even, let's say that you don't care about race. Let's say that, I hate to say this, but let's say you're a racist. You think that somehow Black and brown people should be locked up on all this stuff. I think you care about your bank account. And we're wasting so much money that could go to do so many other things that will make us all safer. So the problem is that even in those crimes, we are sending people to prison. We're just saying we are not going to predict what 30, 40, 50 years from now, future generations are going to think about you. We are not going to say that you will never be able to get out of prison. We don't believe that 70 and 80-year-olds belong in prison, costing us millions of dollars a year to maintain them and keeping them away from perhaps having the last few years around their family. I understand that maybe they committed a serious crime. So it is just absurd. Even those arguments, they say, well, DA is not prosecuting. We are prosecuting. We are being thoughtful about our prosecutions. We are being measured about the way we do things. We're looking at places where we can provide an alternative to incarceration. We know that sending people that are mentally ill or people that have substance dependence or both and are houseless don't get any better when we put them in jail for a few weeks. We know that actually we're better off as a community providing them alternatives. We know that sending children to adult prison like Ryan doesn't fix anything. All it does is become very costly and very socially broken. So yes, we're doing those things, but we are absolutely holding people accountable. We're absolutely prosecuting, and we're actually working with the police to go through a public health lens to deal with violence. We're putting right now with the LAPD a whole structure, working with the county Department of Public Health, to do sort of public health approach interventions that in some cases will lead to an arrest and a prosecution. But we're hoping actually that we can intervene before the murders occur, before the shootings occur, rather than just simply be singly focused on punishment and arresting and prosecuting people.
Well, certainly the empirical data, John Pfaff, PFAFF, has some done good work on this, Radley Balco and others. The empirical data shows strongly that it is the certainty, not the severity of punishment that deters, right? If you can raise up the certainty that people will be apprehended, that's what really has the deterrent effect. That means we have to have a higher clearance rate. Only the police can give us a higher clearance rate. We have to have a higher solution rate. Only they can give us a higher solved crime rate so that we can then get more certainty than severity. I'm going to say something very unpopular now just to stir the pot a little before going to Melina. I think that there are a lot of officers who aren't going to get that much discerned signal from Derek Chauvin doing 4 years because they know the bar is awfully low, 29, 9 minutes and 29 seconds, videotape, all that kind of, they know that's an aberrational case. So that may not have much deterrent effect on them. I think we might get more deterrent effect by having 12 officers do 2 years, but which they'll be doing in solitary, by the way, because they're going to be in isolation. You try to spend 2 weeks in solitary, and you tell me that's not excruciating punishment. But we might get more deterrence from 12 officers doing 2 years than 1 officer doing 24 years, right? In terms of the deterrence theory. That's how it is. Certainty rather than severity is really what sends out the strongest deterrent signal. And by the way, I saw Newt Gingrich stand at a table at USC just before the COVID-19 coming from the right on a right-on race basis and say, if I had my druthers, no one would do any time for any nonviolent offenses, right? He stood at the front. So from a just cost-benefit standpoint, conserving scarce resources kind of standpoint, and not from a, sympathy for wrongdoer standpoint, right? But you're right. There was a time when you were hearing more from the people on right on crime. I hope their voices come back up. Melina, but back to you for a moment. I was really surprised, not surprised, but I was really intrigued and interested when in Philadelphia, they had the numbers come back from the Black communities at an 80% rate of support for Larry Krasner, this, kind of progressive prosecutor in the mode of George Gascon that we're talking about today. And yet a lot of people, the pundits, newspaper, New York Times, a lot of outlets were predicting that the spike in crime was going to make the Black community turn on Larry Krasner and turn on the progressive prosecutor because they would somehow connect his progressive prosecution policies to the spike in crime. But they didn't fall for that okie doke, at an 80% clip, right? How can you help us? I think that shocked a lot of journalists, who were they were in there being stenographers for law enforcement as they typically are, and they didn't see this coming. So could you help us folks maybe understand how that happened?
Sure. Before I get to that, I do want to respond to your point around police and prison and what did you say, certainty versus time, severity. I want to just say that when you apply that to police, Yes, right. And when we're talking about police being held accountable for the murder and abuse of our people, we absolutely want to see them held accountable. And so what we saw 2 days ago with Derek Chauvin sentencing the 270 months or 22 and a half years to which he was sentenced, many believe that it wasn't long enough, right? We know that he could have done 30, maybe 40 years. When I think about, I'm gonna just quickly give another quick story. There's a brother also in Lancaster named Jay Burton, who's been in there since he was 16 years old. 32 years he's been in prison, right? If Jay Burton can be in prison for 32 years when he was convicted at 16 years old, then what does it say that Derek Chauvin only got 22 and a half, will probably serve somewhere around 15 years for a murder that we all witnessed, right? I think it further illuminates that the only reason Derek Chauvin was tried, convicted, and sentenced to any amount of time is because the community made that happen. We got to remember that even though they tried to eventually give us a bad apples narrative, that the Minneapolis Police Department and the city of Minneapolis actually went pretty far in trying to protect Derek Chauvin from conviction. And that's what we see all around the country. You remember that the first narrative that they put out was that George Floyd died of quote unquote medical complications. And were it not for the courage and will and immense love for her community that 17-year-old Darnella Frazier showed, we wouldn't even know George Floyd's name, let alone be witnessing Derek Chauvin be sentenced to 22 and a half years for the murder of this Black man, Black father, Black brother, beloved member of his family and community. And so, yes, one of the things we lift up is that Black Lives Matter is an abolitionist organization. We don't believe that prisons, jails, or police offer safety to our communities. However, as long as we have them, the first ones who should go are police who kill and abuse our community members. So I believe actually that police like Derek Chauvin should not be given the luxury of solitary confinement. Jay Burton got solitary, right? So he was in solitary for many of those years. He's now back in general population. What I believe accountability looks like is Derek Chauvin having to face general population after he stole the life of George Floyd in front of everybody. Make him face the faces of those that look like people like George Floyd. Now, that said, when we talk about severity, and I know it's a double standard, but there's a Black radical tradition called survival pending revolution, right? So we live in the midst of all of these contradictions, right? So I am an abolitionist who wants to see Derek Chauvin get more time than 22 and a half years to which he was sentenced. I want to see every single officer in LA County who killed some of the 634 people in the last 8 years. I want to see them do time. I want to see them under the jail. I want to see, I think I saw Sheila Hines Brim on this call. I want to see Breonna Bratton, the one who murdered Waukesha Wilson in her cell. I want to see her go to prison. I want to see that happen. And I recognize that's a contradiction for an abolitionist. The other piece, the other side of it, is when we talk about severity versus certainty. I think that the greatest deterrent is not either severity or certainty. It's prevention, it's resources. And I know it's not an S word, so it doesn't sound as good. But when we think about what's happening, and George pointed to that we've seen crime go up all around the country. There's a couple of things that a couple of my scholar friends pointed to. One, it's up this year over last year. Well, last year we were in the midst of a pandemic with virtually no crime, right? There was almost no crime. So of course it's going to go up. But if you look at cities like Newark, New Jersey, where one of my best friends leads a community safety team, and Mayor Raz Baraka has been willing to reallocate funds towards community approaches to public safety. This is one of the only urban spaces where you see crime not go up, and in fact, in some categories actually drop. It's because they're invested in prevention and intervention and community solutions to public safety. So I would say that the answer is really resources, not investment in either certain or severe approaches that lock our people, lock our community members up for longer periods of time. Finally, when you ask about Black support, right? Black support for Larry Krasner, I think to the Black community, to a lesser degree, Larry Krasner resonates in many of the same ways that George Gascon does for us, in many ways, in the same way that Chesa Boudin does for the 10 Black people left in San Francisco, right? That he is seen as one who will carry our agenda. So it's not about Larry Krasner. It's about recognizing that Black communities, I don't know what's wrong with mainstream journalists that they don't get, even though we constantly demonstrate that we have the greatest, most prolific vision, right? That we understand the importance of visioning and imagining beyond what is. This happens all the time. When you think about everything from art, I know you're a hip hop scholar as well as a legal scholar, right? Everything from art to politics, Black people have the most radical imaginative vision, right? Robin Kelly writes about this in Freedom Dreams. They still discount us. They still don't get that Black communities are not tethered to old ways of doing things, that Black communities understand that prisons are vestiges of slave plantations and police are vestiges, are the descendants of slave catchers. And so when you have a district attorney, when you have anyone who's willing to advance beyond these vestiges that literally put targets on the backs of Black people. And one of the things that's written about when we think about books like Black Visions, right, is that Black people have the highest degree of quote unquote linked fate, a concept called linked fate, the idea that, you know, everything that happens to one Black person has an impact on all of us, right? So Black folks in Black communities recognize that when Jay Burton does 32 years, when Ryan does 16 years, beginning as a 15-year-old child, when Black community organizers are targeted for criminalization, when you are dismantling and uprooting Black communities, when you are sending police into our schools and neighborhoods, and they're sitting at our bus stops and they're there to terrorize us, that is not good for any of us. And so Black folks want to see things transform. So of course they voted for Larry Krasner over an old model, an oppressive model of quote unquote justice at a rate of 80%. I'm surprised it's not higher than 80%. You're not gonna bamboozle Black communities by shoving old models that are tied to our oppression down our throats.
Great. I'm going to start posing some questions that have come through me from the chat. The first one goes to DA Gascon, and it is that the question of how do you deal with some of the dissension within your ranks of DAs who are wedded to the old conception of justice, rooted in retaliation, retribution, and revenge, and are reluctant to come around to the new approach that you are, that you ran on and were voted into office on, that was rooted in redemption and rehabilitation and restoration, when many of their professional identities, some of them for 20 and 30 years, have wrapped their personal and professional identities around retribution. They made a profession out of retribution. And yet the voters through you are asking them to approach things differently. how do you deal with that dissension in your ranks?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because it's certainly one of the challenges that I face. And unlike many other jurisdictions, including Philadelphia, where Larry Krasner, who was a friend, by the way, had a tremendous amount of freedom as to who to keep and who to hire, I don't have that tool, right? We're a very, very, very strong civil service structure with a lot of protections for people that normally would not be afforded that kind of protection, just simply because they are at a professional rank on a different kind of a different line of work. But having said that, the majority of the women and men in the office are following the directives in my direction, and many are not only supporting them, but they believe in them, and others are just following the directions of the boss. And then we have a small minority, very vocal, that is fighting us. And those are the ones that you're seeing on Fox News, on KFI. Those are the ones that you see going to city councils, especially around the San Gabriel Valley area, up and down the 210 and the 605 corridor, which, by the way, were the same communities that oppose, my election. And interestingly enough, in something that I actually, just really learned recently, that many of those small cities with city councils, and I don't even think a lot of the people in their community understand that they have, their council members, so there are sometimes mayors that are either current law enforcement officers or former, and you begin to understand why often, the budgets and the way they're dealing with lawsuits and all that stuff is almost like sort of hiding, the expenses of bad posting, and in this case, charge against not only reform, but pro recall. And some of those people that are coming from my office and speaking to some of those, they also are very, very much tied to the old way of doing business. And of course, for them, the reality is that the train left the station, and they're trying to recover their identity and their sort of the political strength, and by the way, their economic strength that comes from the old system. So the way that I'm dealing with is, first of all, was putting very clear directives. Secondly, beginning to shift the culture of the office by the way that we promote and the way that we hire people and the recognitions that we provide. And, little by little, and most organizational experts would tell you that it takes, 5-6 years to alter the culture of a large organization. So I would say that we have made a tremendous amount of progress in 6 months, and we'll continue to move forward. I want to raise an interesting point that both you and Melina talked about, but I want to kind of put a different spin to it concerning the sentencing of Officer Derek, or former Officer Derek Chauvin. I actually believe that was a fair sentence, by the way. But here's the interesting thing. If we would have had a young black kid putting his knee on the neck of, let's say, a white kid, okay? And there would have been a video of 9 minutes as you see this white kid dying in front of us, I would have had hue and cry that this kid should be either facing the death penalty or facing life without the possibility of parole. And in fact, as we saw with the case of Ryan's story, but many others, people are fighting tooth and nail because I will not send somebody to prison for life or seek the death penalty. But yet you haven't heard one of those voices. I have not seen Steve Cooley get up or Villanueva get up and say that was an awfully low sentence for such a horrendous murder. Not a peep, right? And that is why it's so important that we get behind the curtain, that we see what is really motivating these people, because it's not anything about safety or, as punishment is convenient for them and it's economic and political power. And again, I underline, I think that the sentence of Officer Chauvin was fair. I don't think he should go to life for, forever, for prison forever. He committed a horrendous crime, but I do believe that he, like any other human being, should be given an opportunity for redemption, right? But that standard is not being applied here locally around when it happens to be a black person or a Latino or a poor person that commits even a much lesser crime. And that is the hypocrisy I would love to see Steve Cooley. I would love to see Villanueva doing a press conference and complaining that, you know, Derek Chauvin should go to prison for life. But here we are.
I hear you. And before I go to Melina with the next question, I think that's just a really good way of putting a head on the point that I was trying to get at, and Melina helped me clarify, because I feel the same way in my gut as you and Melina, George. I kind of feel like, damn it, he got at least what he deserved. You know, from what I saw, you know, I have my own post-traumatic stress disorders about, you know, being enclosed and confined spaces. So I know what a panic attack is. I know what he was going through. I would have done it. I would have acted the same way under the same circumstances, you know. So I really feel that, but I also know that if he'd been Black, like you said, you know, we show less compassion for the human frailty of even violent Black wrongdoers than we'll show for the human frailty of similarly situated white wrongdoers, right? And I just want us to have the same level of compassion for human frailty, whether we're talking about Black or white person, not having Black people, you know, monsterized right away, and, you know, white people seen as more fully human, capable of, you know, redemption, maybe in the long run. Melina, I got a question, and you can weigh in on any of that if you want, or a question about particularly the End Police Association campaign and weekly vigils outside LA Police Protection League. Someone wanted to know, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I'm so glad. I wonder who asked that question. I'm so glad that you asked, whoever asked. Thank you for asking. As we wrapped up our Jackie Lacey Must Go demonstrations in November, and we wrapped it up after more than 3 years because we won, because we got her out of office, because we were able to usher in a progressive district attorney who is carrying our agenda. And one of the things we say, as long as he carries this progressive justice reform agenda, we will support and flank him as much as we need to. And, you know, again, it's a strange turn to go from protesting the district attorney to saying stand with him, but we absolutely must stand with him. So as we ended those demonstrations, which were also on Wednesday at 3 o'clock, we started to think about, well, who is our opponent at every turn, right? As we work to defund the police and reimagine public safety, as we work to hold murderous and abusive police officers accountable, as we work to remove police from our schools and invest in our young people, as we work to provide resources through People's Budget LA for the things that the community actually needs. Who is our opponent at every term, on every bill, on every effort? Who attempts to criminalize us, brutalize us, arrest us? Who made a beeline for our children as they were having their own demonstration, really threatening them and traumatizing them? It is the police associations that pretend to be unions. They are not unions. And I'm saying that because I am a member of a public employees union. I'm a member of the California Faculty Association. I'm the daughter of a union carpenter, right? I'm the daughter of a unionized teacher, right? And I know that unions are not just about advocating for the salary and benefits of its members. Unions are supposed to be about solidarity with other working class people. And when we think about what police associations like the LA Police Protective League, like the Association of Los Angeles Deputy Sheriffs, which is one of the main forces trying to get DA Gascon recalled, right? When we think about what they're doing, they are actually in direct opposition to every other working class person, right? I think about Ryan Twyman, who was murdered by LA County sheriffs 2 years ago now, right? And I think about what it means that Chiquita Twyman, his sister, is a delegate to the LA County Federation of Labor, and that she has to sit across the table, or now sit in Zoom, with members of the association that stole her brother's life and try to protect the sheriffs, the deputies that stole that life. So End Police Associations became our new Wednesday protest. So since January, we've been protesting outside of the LA Police Protective League headquarters, which is directly across the street. I think it's really quite beautiful that they're directly across the street from ACLU headquarters, which has a massive mural that features, the face of Patrisse Cullors and Baba Akili, and I'm on there too, and they have to look at us every day, right? Well, on Wednesday, they have to look at us in person, and we gather every single Wednesday at 3 o'clock. And we say that we have to absolutely end police associations. That means ousting them from the House of Labor. That means ending their ability to bully and bribe elected officials. It means stopping them from, use the term, pilfering the public purse, right? That they constantly try to get a greater and greater share of public dollars. And it also means ending special protections for police like qualified immunity. And so in Black Lives Matter, not only Los Angeles, but Black Lives Matter as a global movement, this is now our one of our primary campaigns to take down the police associations that really are very narrow special interests, not unions. And those who want to learn more should come out on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock, 1313 West 8th. And you can also go to the website, endpoliceassociations.com, and I'll drop that in the chat.
Great.
And let me say this, and it's also beautiful. We believe in Dr. King's vision of beautiful struggle. So, when we left the Jackie Lacey protest, we actually kind of missed it because, we like to be together. And when you come out, there's space for children. We have arts, an arts table set up for them. Some unions like IATSE, which is the behind the scenes folks in film, they come, they bring donuts, iced coffee. We ask for healthy snacks. They bring cut up watermelon, and we have just a beautiful time. There's always room for art. We always have art, and we open. I know the police wonder what we're doing, but we always open with breath work. And two of our sisters are dancers. And so we do something we call radical Black stretching. And I know they go, what are they doing? Why are they touching their toes? But it's about, again, abolition is about also ushering in the kind of world that you want. And we want room for Black people to connect with our bodies, our spirits, eat good food, laugh together, and experience Black art, as well as chanting down these very terrible organizations that steal the lives of our people, steal public dollars, and wreak havoc in our communities.
I love the radical Black stretching phrase. I'm thinking of the way that you're really asking us all to stretch our imaginations and reimagining safety in so many ways. I got a question from the chat room, DA Gascon, that is about the successes. They said in the question, we've been talking about the challenges, and that's been taking a lot of the oxygen out of the room. We haven't had a chance to celebrate some of the progress and changes you've been able to make so far. Could you talk about some of those?
Absolutely, and as I started to mention earlier, the majority of the women and men in the office are following the directives, and we are seeing results just in the first 100 days. We saw over 8,000 years of prison terms being taken off the table. And I want to clarify this, because this is what the other side says, well, you're not holding people accountable. We have people that committed serious crimes. They are going to prison, right? But instead of going to prison for life, or instead of going to prison with a death penalty sentence, they're going to prison for a measurable period of time, and they're given an opportunity to rehabilitate themselves and get back into our community. We also had almost, well, by now it's over 100 kids, but in the first 100 days, we had 77 kids that were facing adult prison terms that were put back into the juvenile system where they should be addressed and where, you know, their issues should be dealt with, and whatever accountability is right. We have started the process of having now a special prosecutor that finally his contract was signed now about 3 weeks ago. And he is working on looking at some cases that were old cases. And that's Mr. Middleton, who was a former U.S. attorney, former civil rights lawyer in the U.S. Justice Department, and a civil rights lawyer in our community, who successfully prosecuted the officer in the Rodney King case, the federal case. And he is looking at some of the cases that I and others identify right off the top. We have also a group of community members and civil rights lawyers that are taking a look back at those 600 plus officer-involved shootings that led to death going back to 2012. And they're working with the UCI Law School Clinic in order to review those cases and see the cases that should be reviewed further. At the same time that we have put new management and we're revamping our own internal officer-involved shooting unit and given more resources, so prospectively we can also, look at some of that work. In addition to that, we've already working with the Office of Alternative to Incarceration, which was something that the Board of Supervisors passed about 2 years ago, to providing avenue for people that are committing low-level offenses, that have mental health problems, substance dependence issues, to be diverted before we even file a case. And we now have a pilot program in 10 police stations around the county, where the county it has contracted with community organizations that have social workers. So when the police makes an arrest, assuming that there's no violence involved or no other threat to public safety, rather than put them in jail for a few hours and they will get released anyway, they're immediately being turned over to the social worker who is at the station, and they have a seamless process where they get connected with housing, mental health intervention, and other services that we know that would go a longer way in order to create more safety and security for all of us. And we are now getting ready to roll a process. As we close down our hardcore gang unit, which was a unit that was really the vestiges of the 80s and 90s of the tough on crime. And by the way, a unit that really proud itself into incarcerating people massively. And we created what we call our community violence reduction, which is a partnership that not only has police and prosecutors deployed at the police station, but it also has county health, it has social workers, and it has community groups. And we're going to begin to look at violence through a public health lens, where we can provide intervention and prevention where we can, way before we get into the arrest and prosecution, which will occur sometimes, and we recognize that. So those things are already in place, are already yielding tremendous results. We will continue this process. And by the way, I know there was a question in the chat just very quickly about maybe a concern that, we're releasing people from prison, but maybe we don't have the resources to deal with. I assure you that the people that are being released, there's a tremendous amount of both public and private money that is being placed to provide the services and the intervention and the sort of the seamless process to make sure that our community members that are returning from the institutions are given the support that they need in order to be successful. So all these things are all happening at the same time. And I would consider those major successes in the middle of this fight.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask one question from the chat that zeroes in on houselessness. You can't walk through our own Skid Row and not recognize that, this fiercest expression of structural violence in America, that is the nickel, is 75% Black, right? And so it's very much wedded to racial justice. At the same time, we're looking at class. Melina, I think about the people standing on the roofs after Hurricane Katrina in the 9th Ward with water up to their necks. And when a day goes by, 2, 3, 4 days go by, the water's still up to their necks and FEMA isn't getting its act together to come and help them. That's what I see down in Skid Row. Only it's not 4 days, it's 4 weeks, months, years, by whole families with water up to their necks. And we are indifferent to their cries a lot of times. And when we do respond to their cries, George, it's in the way that we did in 2006 with the LAPD when it started the Safer Cities Initiative. That just said we were going to solve homelessness, the problem of homelessness, by cracking down on the down and out, right? And they, in their own, in the name of their own good, citing them, sending them to mega shelters, putting them on 12-step programs, because the problem of homelessness, according to that policing model, and think about how many hundreds of millions of dollars we spent on that police model to solve homelessness in the nickel, right? How's that working out right now? But we thought that the problem, you know, the conception of the problem of homelessness was not a lack of affordable housing, not a lack of adequate jobs or health care, but rather lack of personal responsibility. People just needed to heal their own interpersonal irresponsibility, their inner brokenness. And so it seems like now we have Sheriff Villanueva going back to that old playbook, saying we're going to crack down on the houseless, the down and out. It's a police matter. You know, houselessness is really something that we can solve through police intervention and through prosecution, rather than through what you've been fighting for a long time now, Melina, a people's budget, you know, that would not criminalize houselessness, would help us avoid turning some of our most desperate neighbors into criminals just for being, period, in a state of being. That's all you got to be. So I'm gonna start with you, Melina, and then go to George about how could we think about this houselessness problem, the homelessness problem, in ways that don't involve the criminal justice system and don't involve more blame and punishment.
So, you know, we've been talking about radical imagining, and, you know, there is a required reimagining of the world. But I think that when we talk about housing, you don't even have to be imaginative. It's just common sense, right? So you mentioned I've been doing people's budget work for some time. We launched People's Budget LA, you know, just around the pandemic, and began pushing really heavily have been pushing really heavily over the last year. But even before there was a People's Budget, we'd been talking about defunding the police and spending money on resources. But that's only been for the last 6 or 7 years. Black Lives Matter is only 8 years old. Who's been doing the work is people like Pete White, people like General Dogon. And they reminded us 20 years ago that the answer, it's very basic. The answer to houselessness is house keys, not handcuffs. Common sense. If people are unhoused, they need permanent supportive housing, right? Point blank, period. Instead, again, this is back to a system trying to protect itself, right? That when you see people like Villanueva dressing up, I could go on and on about him, but he dresses himself up, puffs his chest out, and walks down Venice Beach and acts like the people who live on Venice Beach, or the people who live on Skid Row, or the people who increasingly are living under freeway overpasses in South Los Angeles are there because they want to be there, right? We have to remember that this is not people who are there because they want to be there. These are people, yes, it is criminal. It's criminal, but it's not the people who are unhoused who are criminal. It's the people who have enabled systems to create a way in which There can be somebody in Los Angeles who has 3 or 4 homes, and there can be other people in Los Angeles who don't have a place to live, where you can have hotels sitting empty throughout a year-long pandemic, but unhoused people on the streets, right? And so we have to be very clear that what Villanueva is trying to do is justify his job, justify the sheriff's department, justify abuse of our people. He and Michael Moore, the chief of LAPD, have conspired to set aside 2,000 jail beds for unhoused people. Now, you know, I'm not going to talk too long, but I think Sister Kenyatta is on, and she will vouch for the fact she knows the Quran much better than I do. But we've talked about this before, Jody, that in my faith tradition, in order for someone to be seen as having sinned, the state is responsible for making sure that they've had every resource first, right? So who's actually responsible for houselessness are elected officials, are systems like police associations, are moneyed interests that would enable an economic structure that allows people to be unhoused. We have to remember what Future, not the rapper Future, my comrade in struggle from Black Lives Matter Global, says that poverty is on purpose. Poverty is on purpose. People are unhoused because people have decided to enable structures that allow people to be unhoused. And so what we have to do is absolutely push ourselves to make sure that we push back against Villanueva, we push back against Michael Moore, but we also push back. We can't simply swallow the mayor of Los Angeles budget. And if you look at what's been happening over the last week, he'll probably be the mayor of Los Angeles for more time than he had hoped, given the scandal that's coming out, right? But he introduced a budget that increased LAPD spending by $40 million, $44 million. And city council cut off $4 million, but said, yeah, we're gonna give LAPD $39 more million. That could have been $39 million for housing. That could have been $39 million for resources. And so we have to say that even if they come off as not as bad as Villanueva, we got to push back and say, Measure J needs to be fully funded. We demand a people's budget. We demand resources for our folks, and we're going to invest our time and energy in building a movement that says you will not criminalize our unhoused brothers and sisters. We are criminalizing a system. We're indicting a system that allows them to be unhoused in the first place.
Yes, George, I'm going to go to you, and I think that's going to be our time. We're going to be done with time for now.
Yeah, and I'll be quick. Here's the thing. I think that the whole thing with Villanueva was bad political theater. This is a person that, you know, is politically and morally bankrupt and is trying to use every opportunity that he can in order to further his own agenda. Interestingly enough, you know, there are people that have been doing the work, you know, day in and day out. In addition to many community members, you have people like Mike Bunning, who's been working and finding housing solutions and health-based and social worker-based interventions, and, you know, doing so often quietly under attack. And you have members of the board of supervisors that have been working on this. The reality is that there is a lot that has been going on in order to reduce the despair and the impact of houselessness in our community, including Venice. And what we're seeing is we're just seeing the forces of the past that continue to want to be the forces of the present, that want to criminalize the poor, that want to find criminal justice or criminal legal system solutions to a problem that will never be fixed by handcuffs. I love the term that Melina said, you know, house keys instead of handcuffs. That's the direction that we have to go. And the reality is that while there is certainly a need for policing in every community, the size of a police department needs to be reevaluated. You know, the cost of one police officer can house multiple people a year. And we have to evaluate that and put that on the balance, because there's so much that we get our police departments to do that could not be done by police. You know, there are things that they should be there for to create safety, assuming that it's done right. But there's so many other things that we need to bring other people to the table, public health, community organizations. But at the end of the day, the solution for houselessness is plain and simple. It has to be a roof over your head. You have to have keys to a door. Until we do that, we can talk until we turn blue, but we're not going to solve the problem. A concrete box is not the solution to houselessness.
This is, I'm going to hand this back over to the organizers now. This has really been uplifting for me, my Sunday service. I really needed this right about now. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand this back over.
Thank you so much, Jody. On behalf of ICUJP and all of us who have been listening in, both live stream and also here, thank you very much, both Melina and George, for bringing to us what I consider very hopeful interaction. Melina, I don't know how you do it as an academic, to have a full-time job as an academic, do the changes you're making there at Cal State, and at the same time lead us all in understanding that by organizing, by working together, we can make change happen. I was at some of those let's get Jackie Lacey out of here Wednesday meetings, and they are very hopeful and uplifting now in retrospect, because we see that it can work. And we're very grateful, George, to you for bringing in this much more progressive reformist agenda that gives us some hope that maybe, in fact, we can make change happen for our people in the communities. And for us at ICUJP, who have been very against the kind of military budget that the United States has, where such a huge percentage of the budget goes towards military, to now say, no, let's invest it in community. Let's take that budget. But instead, what we're seeing in our country is that the police have been trained by the military. And so those processes have to keep, there's a lot of work for us to do, in other words. We have to work together. And I just want to thank you all and want to invite everybody here to come September 11, in September 11th, 9/11, I keep thinking, when we were founded, because we knew that there was going to be war against Iraq, and war and violence is not an answer. And we would like you to come and join us as we celebrate the life of George Regas, who was one of our founders and conveners, as well as bring hope to the next generation that we can stop our military engagement and stop the violence that translates from over there to here, through the trauma, the post-traumatic stress that our veterans go through, the houselessness they go through, and then the criminalization of people who end up on the streets. So we invite you all. We also would like to tell you that right now, following this, for half an hour, there will be a discussion on ending racism, and we would like you to come and put in your thoughts about what actions we can take to end racism. So on that note, again, thank you all. Thank you, George. Thank you, Melina. Thank you, Jody. You did a phenomenal job of moderating this discussion. And we look forward to seeing you all on September 11th at All Saints Church, and also hybrid virtually.